inspire.
Welcome back to Starting Now. I'm your host, Jeff Sarris. This is the show where I talk to entrepreneurs to reveal the unexpected paths to where they are today. Today, my guest is Mig Mora, better known as Spottie WiFi. I am so excited for this conversation, and it was amazing. We dove into everything. I had my mind blown when I saw photos from ApeFest because I know who Mig is. He used to perform here in Chicago with a band. We talked about all of his story in the band and everything, but it just blew my mind how creators and driven people keep going. And we just inevitably crossed paths again. But yeah, Amara, I heard that you really enjoyed this one. Oh, I could not hear you, but I can hear you now.
It's okay. You can just read my lips. But yeah, I loved it. It's so inspirational, so great, just all the pivoting and everything. So it was phenomenal. I definitely got a lot out of it.
Okay, cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. But without further ado, it's time for my conversation with Mig, aka Spottie WiFi. This is sort of the Mig and Spottie. Is it okay, calling you Mig, just referring you by name? Okay, cool. Yeah, it's sort of like a Mig/Spottie interview, I feel like, which leads me to the very first question is, are you Spottie? You, Mig. Are you Spottie? Or is Spottie a character that you've created? Because I know it sort of started as a character, but I feel almost like there's some point where maybe you merged, maybe you still see it separate. I'm just curious on your thoughts there.
Yeah, it's really both, it kind of vacillates. Like sometimes I'm much more stepping into a character versus sometimes I'm using this smallish platform that I'm building to deliver a message that's really, more from the heart or more personal, So it just kind of depends. And that happens with the music too. Like there's sometimes where I'm literally writing to kind of advance the storyline of Spottie, the character or the characters around him. And then there's other times where it's like a kind of both of us, we're speaking in unison,
Yeah, definitely. And Spottie isn't just you, it's you and Stephen Clark, correct?
Correct. Stephen Clark, my best friend, longtime collaborator. And he's the main music producer, although we do collaborate with other producers. But he's also my partner. We operate Spottie WiFi as a brand, as a business, and we're co-owners in that.
Nice, yeah. And real quick before I jump past it, but the Twitter account, there's always Spottie's a little polarizing. Like Spottie really gets into things. Is that you coming through? Is that Spottie more so? Sort of how is that balance right now?
Right now, that's been a little bit more me speaking my mind, because I definitely the last couple of weeks I've been very vocal about a couple things that I see happening in the NFT world that I had something to say about it. But in terms of tone or voice or even just approach, I take some licenses as Spottie that sort of the character allows me to take, whereas a lot of times I'll have something to say from my Twitter account and I'll say it, loudly as Spottie, literally all caps. And then I get in a conversation with somebody about it and they came into the conversation thinking I was going to be one way or thinking that they were going to totally disagree with me. And then when they really hear me out and they hear me talk about something in not all caps, so I'll say the exact same thing potentially. And all of a sudden it'll make a lot more sense to them,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you feel like having that little distance is beneficial for you? Just as Mig, as you, are you able to express things that maybe you wouldn't express otherwise? Or is it just completely one and the same now?
I think it just helps me express things in a different way. Spottie, the character, he has, he cuts right to the point. He's very direct. Sometimes he takes things to the extreme, to make a point. He'll illustrate something in a really extreme or dramatic way as he sees it, and it might rub people the wrong way, but it kind of gives me license to push the conversation forward in sometimes a blunt way, just to like get straight to the point.
Mm-hmm. Was any of that part of the strategy behind starting Spottie?
Not really. Well, I guess it's more like a symptom of the underlying of a root cause. Like Spottie, the character, one of the few things I knew about this character when I decided to name my CryptoPunk, and give him a backstory and a personality. Of course, it's going to be influenced by my personality, but Spottie's defining characteristic is he has spots on his face. If you're just looking at the CryptoPunk, right? And the interesting thing about the spots on his face is that's what makes him rare. There's 10,000 CryptoPunks, but there's only 124 that have spots. And when I bought the CryptoPunk in February of last year, the spots were basically an undervalued trait. They still are an undervalued trait, actually. Like if you look at the price of a CryptoPunk overall, the most affordable one you could get, versus one that has a trait as rare as the spots, then you'll quickly see that, oh, the spots are underpriced for how rare they are. And that gave Spottie, the character that I developed, a chip on his shoulder, because I feel like everyone can relate to that. Everybody has something about them, you know, maybe physically or personality wise or whatever, that the world would discount or the world would point and laugh at or not find valuable or attractive. But that's what makes us all individuals, you know. And Spottie embraces his spots, he embraces his flaws. And a part of me doing music with Spottie was to say, I'm going to take CryptoPunk that a lot of people might cast aside, and I'm going to make it even more special than the other CryptoPunks, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've owned your IP. I mean, you have really, like, you've set the bar for that, like the standard in how someone can take this investment, because this is a serious investment, even though you bought it now, what, a year and a half ago, a year and a half plus. How much was it at the time, sort of USD equivalent?
It was a little over 40 grand, 27 Ethereum at that time.
And that's still early, like early in the sort of the growth of punks and the value and everything. Because now do you know around what the floor is ish?
Now it's a little over 100 grand to get, you know, the most affordable one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I know you were into crypto early and everything. I want to dive into all that. I like to rewind really far just to sort of set the stage for how you became Spottie today, and sort of the journey that is uniquely yours, because I think that's so valuable just to see how everyone has a completely different story. But the more people that you learn their story, the more you can realize, oh, like this little point, this little bullet, I can relate to that, or I'm here now, or I'm there, whatever it is. So before we dive in, I'm really excited to talk about IP and like trademark versus copyright and all these things that are just confusing to people, because you have that on lock and you get it also from your law background. Everything that you've done, you have so much insight into it. But I just wanted to completely zoom backwards. And young Mig, way before, so The Bridge, I guess, was your first group, your first rap group. Before that even, where did you see yourself going? What did you sort of envision for yourself as a young person?
Man, you know, I had when I was a kid, I had a fireman phase. I had a lawyer phase, which I did end up going to law school and practicing for a short amount of time. And then when I was in high school, I really wanted to be a filmmaker. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to USC, University of Southern California, and I wanted to go to film school there. I did get accepted as an undergrad to go to USC, which really doesn't matter, you know, like film school is a whole nother thing. But I didn't end up being able to go out there, you know, just because I grew up in the Midwest and it's far and it's expensive and whatnot. But yeah, that was like my early dream, was to be a filmmaker. Music came later, like while I was in college and post college.
Interesting. And so is law school, do you start in law school, or is that something you do after you do your undergrad?
You do undergrad, and I did undergrad and then went straight into law school.
Okay, so what's that connective tissue then? When you were in undergrad, how did you find music? How did you suddenly become this performer?
So my producer that you mentioned, Stephen Clark, we met in high school, and we actually started making music in high school. It just wasn't necessarily something I was really thinking of as like a career. It was for fun. We did maybe a couple shows together, that sort of thing. And it might have even been like right after high school that we did like a couple shows or like really recorded a couple songs, but it was around that time. And then I didn't really do much while I was in undergrad, because I went to undergrad in the suburbs of Chicago in Wheaton, which you'll know Wheaton.
Oh yeah.
And then he went to Loyola, which is in the city on the north side in Rogers Park. But after Wheaton, after I graduated, I finally moved to Chicago. So I moved to Rogers Park, and that's when we lived a few blocks away from each other. And I think it was very quickly that it was like, yo, we should be doing music like all the time, since we're like neighbors now, and recruited my friend from grade school, Hollywood, who he still lived in Rockford at the time. And he came in one weekend, and that's when the group was formed.
Nice. And yeah, and that was the Bridge. That was your sort of originals group to start, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that was the Bridge. It was mostly like party music. But we had a good run. I was like, Stephen was always really great with the music. Hollywood had been rapping since we were kids. And then I was just really good with, this was the MySpace era, and like getting in people's DMs, finding opportunities to perform, showcases, things like that. We ended up opening for some big acts, and just kind of like putting together our own little tours, around the Midwest. And, we made some waves in the local scene, but it just wasn't, as I did with some other groups, but just wasn't really lucrative, but it was fun and we learned a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's so much talent. What years was that about?
That was like 2006 to 2008 or 9, something like that.
It's funny because like that's like, I don't know, that's prime time for me, like age wise. So I feel like there's so many artists that were in Chicago, are in Chicago, whatever, who were in a similar spot as you, and I loved seeing what they were able to build. Like Chris Cernell, I think you know him, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah. He had his band. Like I've had him on the show before and everything. He's still producing music, doing everything. Like Stubby from Lucky Boys Confusion. Like all these people. There was this time period. Plain White Tees, Tom, like all these people in Chicago doing things, making moves. But it's so hard to hit that next step, hit that next level, and actually make it a full-time career or really run with it in a way that is feasible long-term. So you found yourself then joining, or did you join or start the cover band?
So I started a couple projects. I started working as an artist manager, because I was having a lot of success managing the Bridge. And then started managing other groups, started forming groups, and yes, formed a couple of cover bands, one of which I performed in, and started writing original music with as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where I came across you first, was as the MC of this band.
Exactly. So I was MCing, there was another singer and then a full band, and we really grinded, man. We played a lot of shows. That was where I would say I kind of cut my teeth as a performer. I had done a lot of shows, but it's just a different types of crowds, going from like pure hip hop shows to more like, it was almost like, it was a rock band with an MC in a lot of ways, so just different types of crowds, different types of expectations in terms of what a crowd is looking for from a performance. To be honest, a lot of rap shows are not good, so that was like a formative experience. And that was probably like 2000. That particular band was, I would say, 2008 or 2009 through 2011.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just for context, because I know you were doing a ton. About how many shows were you doing a week or weekend?
Oh man, there was a point during that run, like in the like busiest stretch, we would do 4 or 5 shows a week, which sounds crazy now, but because it's like it was all throughout the Midwest. It's like a lot of like local, smaller towns, local bars, and then we play cities like Chicago or college towns. We go down to Carbondale, we go over to Columbus, we go up to Ann Arbor. I think we might have gone to Iowa a couple times. So we were and we had a van, bro. It was like that was an experience. That was one of the funnest times, though, for real. That was super fun. Like when I stepped away from music and took a hiatus of like 8 or 9 years, that was one of the things that I looked back on as like, okay, I got to live that life and like know what it's like to like be a touring musician, even though it was a grind and it wasn't always glamorous, but it was a lot of fun.
That grind, that cutting your teeth, that is so important, I feel like, for any sort of endeavor, like entrepreneurial, because this is like your story is an entrepreneurial story. And that's why I wanted to dive into it. And doing so many shows and constantly promoting, constantly connecting with people, because like there's so many layers, so many levels to it that it's not just music and done. It's not like, hey, we'll learn a few songs, write a couple, and then we just go up and go. There's so many different layers to it. And I always really respected how you ran that band, how you brought it all together and what you did to make it something that was known, because the market is saturated. There's so many bands, so many cover bands, and like sort of the party, like just so much that fit that, scratch that itch, I would say. So being able to rise above and step out of the pack is huge. So I really respected that. And one of the questions I sort of had is, what's the economics of running a band like that? Because like clearly everyone has to get paid. You have to be doing so many shows. How do you make ends meet? Because all the travel, all the gas, all the entire crew, there's so much to it.
Well, that type of band can do really well. Once you kind of establish yourself, that band had a lot going for it, because, well, this will sound really superficial, but we were young, so we were able to get started quick because everybody in that band had something to prove, and everybody in that band was down for whatever. It was like, okay, we have an opportunity to go out to, somewhere way out in the middle of wherever, and it might lead to a recurring gig where we're going to get paid. Like, okay, let's do it. So that first year, we were like crazy, just all over the place. And we quickly made a name for ourselves. We had it was a diverse group, relatively diverse. And we had some band members that were easy on the eyes. I'm not talking about myself, but like we just brought we brought a party and a vibe that was different than, we just naturally demographically, I think, stood out from other type of party bands, bar bands, cover bands. And then we started doing our own music, recording our own music. But financially speaking, that type of band can do really well. You get a few bands, or I'm sorry, if you get a few bars that really bring in crowds, especially, like college towns or, bars like the Cubby Bear, things like that, where they're going to be able to fill a room with drunk people. Those types of bars, they have a budget for this sort of thing, versus it's a lot different than like, booking coffee shop gigs as a singer-songwriter, something like that, which all due respect, like that's a whole nother thing. And then you start getting into the private events. You play a few shows at the Cubby Bear, and all of a sudden you get a few Cubs fans that are getting married, that approach you after the show, like, hey, how much to play our wedding? And that's where like you can really do well, because private events, that can be nice money for sure.
Oh yeah. So with anything like that had its time, but then you moved on from the band, everything changed there in your life? And you started City of Win, which I appreciated that. There was something, again, like I would stick a pin in certain people, and I would reference you and what you were doing, reference Chris Cernell and like how he started his own record label and these things at that time, because it was all people building brand. And I've always found brand fascinating. It's what we do, but at the time I was just interested in it. But you jumped over to City of Win, which was merch, and then recorded your own album. I guess what I was curious about is, where does this all fit in with law school? So the touring band, right, recording your own album and moving on, like there's such disparate worlds. Did they overlap at all, or was it sort of a stark a line in the sand moving on to the next piece?
Yeah, they definitely overlapped. I was in law. I moved to Chicago for law school, right? So that began in 2006, fall of 2006. And so I was in the Bridge, the rap group, for the first like at least 2 years of law school. Maybe it was actually, you know what? It was more like I did 2.5 years of law school, and I was so confident in what we were doing with the Bridge. No, I did 1 year of law school. Excuse me. I did 1 year of law school, and I was so confident in what we were doing with the Bridge that I didn't go back to law school immediately. I took time off. I picked up a day job. I was working at the Old Orchard Mall in Skokie, Illinois, at the Apple Store, commuting from Rogers Park, Chicago, which was terrible and never was a good idea. But anyway, so I took time off because of the Bridge. Then when we kind of put the Bridge on pause, I went back to school, or we put the Bridge on pause shortly after I went back to school. That's when I started managing acts as well. And eventually the cover band started. The cover band started before I was done with law school. And by the time I was done, it was going well enough to where that was basically my full-time job. And I would also do some law stuff on the side after I passed the bar to kind of supplement my income, like helping bands with contract or any type of creative with contracts, trademarks, intellectual property, things like that. So it overlapped in a big way because I finished law school end of 2010, and then I was in the band until 2011, and then after that is when I started City of Win. I started working on solo music and did that for a short run.
Yeah, how can you possibly do both of those things? How can you be in law school and be performing 4 or 5 times a week sometimes? Like that seems impossible, but I feel like it also sort of speaks to your drive and dedication to doing things.
Yeah, I mean, I was not a model law student. I didn't I didn't have I didn't get perfect attendance in any of my classes, I wouldn't say. And I would pretty much just cram. I would cram for exams when it was time to buckle down. Even if it meant like, hey, I can't do shows for these 2 weeks out of the year, whatever. I'm reminiscing. I don't know if that was exactly right, but I know there was definitely some times during finals where it was like, hey, I can't do this show, blah 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 blah. But I just kind of did what I needed to do to get by in terms of law school. Took the bar, passed it, but I could have been a more dedicated student for sure. But it just wasn't something that I was really. Once I kind of got there, it wasn't something I was super passionate about. I enjoyed it. Like intellectually, you meet a lot of interesting people. You have a lot of great conversations and you learn a lot. But it wasn't something that I could see myself pursuing as a career. And I knew that really after my first year. That's why I didn't go back immediately. Yeah. And eventually when I did go back, it was just sort of like, okay, I already have this much debt from law school. And reality starts to set in as you're like doing a 45-minute hour, whatever commute to go work your job at the Apple Store and try to make ends meet. It was like, maybe this was a lot easier when I was just like being irresponsible with student loans and borrowing way too much money. That was basically a lot of the thought process.
I do love though that you just sort of brushed off. Oh yeah, so I passed the bar, blah blah. I mean, so many people struggle passing the bar, so it's also kind of amazing. Like you were able to do all that. I mean, there's something there for sure. I know I feel like you're more humble sort of along those lines, but that is a huge accomplishment in itself. But so from that point then, music went away. Like you did City of Win, you did your album, what was it, Music for the End of the World, and then you had this long gap. You said, what, 8-9 years? And what was sort of that trajectory? Because I know you found your way into a brand agency and doing things. So what's that journey?
Right. So 2011, the band breaks up. I started working on this lifestyle and clothing brand. I put together an album, a couple of projects, a couple of music projects, very well received. Like I really actually had I had more momentum in that year, like 2012, as a solo artist than arguably any of those other groups did in terms of, but not in terms of like of revenue, not in terms of like paid shows and things like that, but in terms of, I would say, making an impact on the culture in Chicago and getting critical acclaim or blog love. This was the begin, this was the transition from MySpace to SoundCloud and the blog era at that time. And
and I loved that album, Music for the End of the World. Like I played that so much. And anyway, continue.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm still super proud of that album, and that was part of the hiatus. I didn't plan to take a long time off, but I started working a job in 2012. And the job actually really helped. The job was very supportive of my music. I worked at a creative agency, a digital media agency. They were very supportive. That helped me with my music in some ways. But once I got done with that project, by 2013, I was sort of consumed in getting good at my day job. I felt like I had said a lot on that solo album. And I think in some ways I felt a sense of closure on that whole chapter, because I had a chip on my shoulder from both the bridge, the rap group, and the band not working out. And there were a lot of things that I accomplished with City of Win and with my solo album that it was just like a lot of things on that album I needed to get off my chest and kind of show people like, you shouldn't parted ways with me, that sort of thing. Like, like a scorned lover, like I'm gonna show them what I can do. And then honestly, I think I ran out of gas a little bit by 2013. And by 2013, I had only been at this one job for like a year and a half. And I took a sales job, which was like much higher earning potential, but a lot more like travel and just a lot less of your work being contained within the 9 to 5 hours, So all of a sudden it's like, I have like a legit job and music wasn't like as much of a priority, basically.
Yeah, for sure. So then marketing and brand and all of these pieces, I feel like you put in your hours, you put in your time to further those skills you already had built up. You had built through the bands, but now you're in an agency, you're working with major brands and coming up with these things. How did you find your way into crypto and Bitcoin and everything?
So it was 2017 when I first bought crypto. I was visiting my parents for the holidays, and crypto had been going crazy the whole year, basically all 2017. Every few months you'd hear about it. Every few months it would make its way under the big news stations, the CNN or whatever, talking about how crypto's on another tear. And then of course they would talk just as much about it when it would crash. Well, over the holidays, like a lot of people, I saw that crypto was going up again. And I said, this is it. This is the last time that everybody's getting rich and I'm not getting in on any of it, So at that point, I put in a way more money than I was prepared to lose. And of course, I didn't know anything about markets. I had no experience investing or anything like that. And I learned very quickly, like why they say buy low, sell high, because of course, as soon as I put some money in, it crashed at like historic levels, crazy historic crash. Most of that money that I put in was like vaporized instantly. But thankfully, I had a friend who told me, you don't lose any money until you sell. So I just never sold. I kept all of that crypto that I bought. And then after it crashed, unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of money left to put in to make any big purchases, but I was working and I would just keep like squirreling away little bits here and there, the whole bear market, all of 2018, all of 2019, I was buying, I started by buying smaller crypto coins. I bought my first Bitcoin. I bought my first 2 Bitcoin at about $3,500 each. And that was around the same time that ETH was at like $85. And I was buying ETH at that same time as well.
Nice.
So I just kept buying. And that was but my intro was rough. I had very bad timing. So for anybody that bought in recently, before this most recent crash, like I totally feel you. And believe me, I made every mistake. I bought crypto with credit cards. This was when you could easily buy crypto with credit cards on Coinbase very easily. So I feel the pain. I know how much that hurts, but that was my experience. And thankfully, I was in a position where I could rebound from it, but it was brutal, man. It was really brutal.
Yeah, and by the time you were buying the CryptoPunk, everything had been back up, right?
Yeah. So by like if I remember correctly, like late 2019, things start to rebound, and I start feeling good. Like, okay, great. Like I'm in the green finally, like this is turning out okay. Probably had more money at that point than I ever had in my life. And then COVID hits in March of 2020 and everything's like, again. And I remember I was walking on the street somewhere when I saw it was like a huge dip. I forget what they call the day. It's like, there's like a term for that particular day. And I just had that sinking feeling. But at this point, I was almost numb to it because I'd already been through something like that once. So I was just like, I'm going to let it ride. Like, I'm not going to sell it now, after it crashed. And thankfully, crypto rebounded in a big way that year. Crypto rebounded. I was able to, that's when I got engaged, was the fall of that year, despite losing my job. I got furloughed from my job because of COVID, budget cutbacks and things like that. Ended up losing that job, getting laid off, and I was freelancing, but it was inconsistent. But crypto became my life preserver in that whole year. Actually, that was the one thing that kind of gave me, a foundation. And then January of 2021 is when I finally heard about NFTs. So January 2021, I have this crypto. It's worth something finally. It's rebounded pretty well from COVID by that point. And I start collecting NBA Top Shot moments. I'm a sports fan, so that just made sense, like digital sports highlights and collectibles, just like basketball cards, but for the new millennium or whatever. And through that community, through meeting other collectors, that's when I heard about CryptoPunks. I met a friend. He's from the Chicago area, actually. And he bought 8 CryptoPunks way back in 2020 for like hundreds of dollars each. Yeah, incredible story. School teacher, great guy, totally changed his life. So I meet him last year, and on February 23rd, that's when I bought my CryptoPunk for about $40,000, 27 Ethereum.
Mm-hmm. Wild. Yeah. And then that set the stage for everything else. Like, so from that moment, when you picked, who's now Spottie, 5528. So yep. once you picked them, at that moment, did you look at it as an investment? Like, this is a brand piece I'm going to run with, or was it, I want to own a piece of this because I think it's valuable? Sort of, what did you envision for holding this CryptoPunk?
So I had no inkling of an idea that I would do something musical with it. I was actually, my friend who had 8 CryptoPunks and another friend and we started a YouTube show. So we were interviewing NFT artists and collectors, and we had been doing this for a few weeks. And my friend who had the CryptoPunks, his name is Novo, he would use a digital, Snapchat lens, just like I'm using now on the YouTube show. And I could see the value of his network and his relationships that he had formed within the community of CryptoPunk owners. And so that was, and I really just saw it more so as a portfolio thing, a way to diversify. Like all my money at that time was in crypto. And I said, if I really believe in this technology, and I'm seeing at the same time, Mark Cuban is on YouTube saying CryptoPunks are priceless. They're the rookie card of NFTs. Chamath Yapatal, who I might not say his name right, but one of the early Facebook founders, he's on CNBC saying NFTs are the future. He's buying NFTs. And so it just seemed like, okay, in the same way, I wouldn't have a crypto portfolio without at least some Bitcoin, or nowadays some Bitcoin and some ETH. I just felt like if I really want to make a big play and diversify, this seems like there's no sure bets, but this one out of all these NFTs, it seems like the safest bet, at that time. It was later after I started to see the reaction firsthand of like having a CryptoPunk, putting it as my Twitter profile picture, getting followers, building an audience, just by virtue of having this CryptoPunk and the power of that like built-in community. That's when I started thinking like a musician again, because you struggle so hard as a musician to figure out how to get people to listen to you and hear your music. It's like, well, this is a totally vacant lane. Like nobody's doing this at all. And that combined with like being inspired by groups like the Gorillas or like artists like MF Doom or anybody that's had an alter ego, or a different type of persona for their music, it all just kind of hit me. Like, I'm going to make my CryptoPunk out of all the 10,000 CryptoPunks. They're all historic, but mine is going to be the one that is historic because it's the first CryptoPunk rapper.
Yeah. And that's the brilliance, is if you, for whatever reason, decided to sell your punk, it not only has the value of being a CryptoPunk, having the spots, the rarity, like wherever that is. Now you've created your entire, just this entire value for this specific character that's above and beyond anything else that people will see just from buying a CryptoPunk, which that's the thing that I think is easy to, maybe not easy to overlook, but can be overlooked, because what you're doing is extremely special, extremely unique, and it's something that sets everything apart in a way that you don't see in other areas. Like before NFTs, I'd struggle to think of something like this moment, what you've created, what this journey has been from that purchase until now. And yeah, so I wanted to dive into that too and just sort of talk about like, what does it mean to have IP rights? Because I do think there's a discussion there of like, is it good? Is it maybe not bad, but is it good? Is it indifferent? Because like you can build a brand around a different property. So build a brand around XYZ NFTs. Now, for the person, that could be like, oh, I have the cachet of that. But if XYZ NFTs becomes MySpace, if it becomes like a thing that's old, like nobody wants that anymore, then that could hurt the brand you're building around that, or vice versa. If the project is giving out full IP rights, full licensing, commercial licensing, everything, but then someone decides, okay, I'm going to use this in a way that I deem appropriate, but the people who own the actual created the project, they're just like, ooh, we don't want to be associated with this. I feel like there's like a full discussion there, and obviously it can be a long discussion, but I'm curious sort of like how you look at IP and sort of, I guess maybe just a brief run through of like what IP is from your perspective.
So the way I looked at it and still look at it with my CryptoPunk is I'm building a brand that is catalyzed or accelerated by virtue of the fact that my brand is represented by a CryptoPunk. But my brand is really separable from the CryptoPunk. Mm-hmm. The brand of Spottie WiFi, it can manifest in a lot of different ways, So when I show up at a performance, like a lot of times, I have video content where we show animations of Spottie the character on screens behind me and things like that. But I have a lot of fans that they know me personally. You know, they know when I'm in the room or that sort of thing. And that brand is in some ways it's literally and legally separable from the CryptoPunk. In other ways, it's kind of like people will forever associate the two, you know. But that's the way I look at it as a best practice, is like, if I'm married to the CryptoPunk brand, then there is a certain level of risk there, because I don't have complete control over the brand of the CryptoPunks or every individual CryptoPunk and CryptoPunk owner, you know. Out of all the NFTs out there, I feel the safest about the CryptoPunk brand because it has a certain historical significance and everything like that. But ultimately, like, that's sort of, you mentioned like the difference between trademark and copyright at one point. You know, the Spottie WiFi is the trademark, and that's really like, that's what makes CryptoPunk 5528 more valuable than it was before I owned it. And it's a symbiotic relationship. The CryptoPunk brand has made the Spottie WiFi brand more valuable. But, you know, I guess in terms of the way I think about intellectual property in general, you know, it's super important to me. You know, it was my focus when I studied law at Loyola. And last year, you know, when I started on this journey with Spottie WiFi, what I was doing, it was in a very nerdy corner of the internet. It was very controversial, you know, because it was unclear if I did have a copyright license to do what I was doing.
I forgot about that. Yeah, because at that point it hadn't been really set in stone yet. Yeah,
so it was very ambiguous what the actual copyright license terms were from the original creators of the CryptoPunks and between them and the current owners of each individual CryptoPunk.
And real quick, just to then clarify that, the copyright is the CryptoPunk. It's CryptoPunks as like an organization or whatever owns that copyright. But then a trademark would be your Spottie WiFi, which is separate but together with the copyrighted art, right?
Yes, copyright is references the artwork. So in this case, the CryptoPunk 5528, that copyright used to be owned by an organization called Larva Labs. They founded the whole art project called the CryptoPunks. They created this. And my position was and is that they offered us and gave us a license. Anybody that owns a CryptoPunk or owned one, when Larva Labs owned the copyright of the CryptoPunks, the owners of the individual CryptoPunks had a license to use the copyrighted material, to use the artwork for a personal use or for a commercial purpose, like I do by selling music or selling albums with the artwork on the cover of the album. But everybody didn't agree with me, and it was hard for me to prove my position because there was no terms and conditions page on the Larva Labs and the CryptoPunks website, which it would have helped my case if there was. Instead, I had to do like some sleuthing of like, you know, one of the founders sent this message in a public forum on a Discord server in 2018 and said that anybody that owns a CryptoPunk is able to use their CryptoPunk to sell merchandise up to $100,000 per year, which I exceeded. But still, my position was that I was totally clear, of course.
Yeah.
More recently, their ownership of the CryptoPunk intellectual property, they sold it. They sold it to a newer company called Yuga Labs, and Yuga Labs pretty clearly and definitively said, okay, the terms of use are you can do whatever you want. I'm paraphrasing, it's not legal advice, but that's basically they eliminated all the question marks and all the confusion. And so but because of that confusion all last year and that uncertainty, that's one of the main reasons you don't see a lot of other CryptoPunks doing anything really with their CryptoPunks or the intellectual property. And it's one of the reasons that the Bored Apes became so popular and are now the most valuable NFTs, because that was one of their big selling points from day one was we're going to sell you these pictures of these apes and you'll be able to use those pictures or an interpretation or a derivative work, you know, a reinterpretation of those pictures for anything you want to do. Mm-hmm. And that was a bit of a game changer. And when I started, there were no Bored Apes. There was nobody doing anything with an NFT profile picture, you know, the way that I was doing it, really. So it's just a crazy year and a half. And the fact that now I have the total green light is amazing. Because believe it or not, there was a time a year ago where like I would have conversations with brands, you know, potential partners, potential sponsors, and they loved what I was doing, but like they wouldn't touch a CryptoPunk at that time because it was unclear they might get sued if Larva Labs didn't like what they were doing. Yeah. And now that's a game that's totally different ballgame.
What I really like is that you've separated. You're not just like, I am a CryptoPunk brand. You're using the character within your own completely unique brand. And I don't know if you know of others using this, but I know sort of like with the Bored Apes, there's sort of Bored, I think it's Bored and Hungry, like a burger bar. There's things that are a lot closer to the brand of, say, Bored Apes. But I think the brilliance in what you're doing is that you're not really, there's no confusion that you're from CryptoPunks. It's the CryptoPunk is this. And it's something I really think people could emulate and really, really look at differently, because it's easy to be like, I have a Bored Ape, but it almost is irrelevant which one, because I want to use their like the cachet of Bored Apes and start this business or brand or beer or whatever it is. Do you see anyone else? Like, do you know of anything else that has that sort of that separation? Because I feel like you're much more immersed in this space, but I find it very fascinating.
Well, I would say, you know, there's a guy named G Money. G Money is another CryptoPunk. I believe he bought his CryptoPunk in late 2020, and he's done a great job. Like he's doing a lot on the like high fashion end of things. You know, he had high fashion and streetwear. You know, he's done a partnership with Adidas. I was tangentially involved with that with one of my Bored Apes, but he really there were 8 Bored Apes and his one CryptoPunk that partnered with Adidas. So he really held it down, representing the CryptoPunks in that way. And he's done a lot of cool stuff. I don't even want to try to name some of the high-end fashion brands that he's worked with, because I'm afraid I'm going to misstate something. But you know, look up G Money for anybody listening. He's doing some really cool stuff. Also doing a lot of content. His social media game is great. He uses one of these lenses from the same creator that I use. And then my guy Novo, Crypto Novo 311. You know, these guys were early influences with me, but I would say it is few and far between. On the Bored Ape side, you know, you have a lot of the bigger artists, like Snoop Dogg, you know, Timbaland, Eminem. I know there's a lot that I'm going to forget, but there's a lot of artists that are sort of assigning characters, basically, you know, doing what I've done with my CryptoPunk, doing it with their Bored Ape. I mean, Snoop said himself that he was inspired by what I'm doing. And you see it a lot more with the Bored Apes. And I think that's just virtue of I think I had incredibly fortunate timing. You know, the timing of me purchasing my punk, being in a privileged position to be able to afford one, and then starting when I started, while a lot of people were kind of, you know, too scared or too responsible, depending on how you look at it, to do it when it wasn't clear if I even had the right to, or if I would get sued. And so the Bored Apes were able to avoid all those questions. So a lot of what you see is there. But like you said, I think the CryptoPunk people that are the few that are doing things with their CryptoPunks, maybe they're less attached to the CryptoPunk brand than the Bored Apes are. And I don't know if that's a strength or a weakness. Like so far the Bored Apes are doing really well. So it would seem that it's really great. They've a lot of businesses have been able to use like some combination or like use the word board or use the word ape or things like that and kind of adapt their brand or tailor it to the bigger brand of Bored Ape Yacht Club. That seems to be a winning strategy right now as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always wonder long term, like Spottie WiFi, like you said, that can be forever. I love that you have so many different renders and art styles through the different things, the animations and pixel art and everything through the music videos, that it really it starts here at every time you say 5528, I just have a smile on my face just because it's like from being in the song and everything. It's just funny. But it starts at this point and then you've built out from there. Right. With someone who, or actually no, I want to go a different route. Do you think that any other assets right now, any other IP can or should be pursued in the way that like punks or apes? Because there's so many, it's infinite now, the number of projects, and there's big hitters. But do you think building a brand connected to an NFT in other verticals is a good idea?
It can be, I'll say it depends. I think it depends on where you're at with your craft or with your brand, whether it's a product or a service that you're looking to offer, and what your budget is. I think that like for an up and coming musician, for example, I've definitely given people advice of like, you don't need to buy a CryptoPunk, you don't need to buy a Bored Ape, you don't need to even buy an NFT. There are sometimes communities that you can join for free. There are sometimes free NFTs. I shout out the Gutter Cat Gang. The Gutter Cat Gang is a collection, a community that I'm a part of, and they have some NFTs that are like a few $100, where you can be a full-fledged member of that community for a couple or a few $100s. And that's a community that really embraces musicians, a lot of rap fans. So like I talked to some young rappers and mentioned like, hey, here's an idea. If you have $200 or $300, you could be in this really active community. These people are really active and they will support you and share your music online if you come in and you bring value and you contribute to the community, Mm-hmm. On the other hand, now that's a lower barrier to entry thing, making music, that doesn't necessarily require a huge budget, and a bunch of investment. If I was starting a restaurant or something like that, I don't know. I like the Gutter Cat Gang would still be a great collection. Actually, I'll go ahead and say that the Gutter Cat Gang would still be a great collection to build a brick and mortar business out of. I believe that. But ultimately, man, it's tough. There's just the Gutter Cat Gang is on the short list. I'm talking about them so much right now. I don't even mean to talk about them, but there's not a lot of other collections though after Punks and Apes that I would really, if I was building like something if I was really thinking long term, how do I make sure that this is going to be sustainable and everything? It's a short list. A lot of these NFT collections, they're not going to be around in a few years. Yeah. So we already see it.
Yeah. So with Gutter Cats, what is it about that one? What makes it stand out in a sea of projects?
A few things, and I'm biased. I own several of their NFTs. I'm friends with the founders and all that. But one thing I like about them, I don't know that they've accepted any venture capital. They're completely bootstrapped and stuff. And it's just a super active community. The NFT community that I vibe with is mostly active on Twitter and Discord, and at real life events. And they check all those boxes, very active on Twitter. So if you're a content creator, you'll have a lot of support on Twitter, which is great. And then they do really cool live events, and they're always looking to collaborate from within, collaborate with their holders. There's other collections that you might hear me complaining about on Twitter. I'm not going to name them right now, but it's like, they maybe they made $40 million off of the backs of their collectors, and they're not calling anybody, that's like an everyday like supporter and being like, hey, or they're not looking like, hey, how can we collaborate? Like, oh, you do this, oh, you're a restaurateur, how can we work together? How can we do that? I'm not naming anybody in specific. I'm just saying anecdotally, that's not what Gutter Cat Gang does. Gutter Cat Gang, it's like gang love. If you're in the gang, like, let's work together. And that's what I really like. That's more valuable than having it, depending on your goals and objectives. That's way more valuable than having a $20,000 profile picture, but you can't even get a hold of anybody that is a founder or works for the founders,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Sorry to go down that tangent. Just always curious, because I feel like you have great insight into all of this, and you have like your finger on the pulse of so much. And you were just following your Twitter account. You are up to date on things and you take your perspective, your unique perspective, not just we're all going to make it, like so many people for so long were saying. Like, you're looking at things objectively and saying this is or isn't a problem, and this is why we should demand or expect more or get more. So I wanted to just quickly, because we're already sort of at time, but I wanted to just touch on your project, because I loved that the way you have a generative music collection. You're not just minting, like you've referred to as a gumball machine of sorts, where like you don't know exactly what you're going to get. You're not just minting like I'm Spottie, which I truly do. That song is just, it's so catchy. I don't know how you write these earworms when you do. It's just wild. But that sort of I'm Spottie, my name is kind of connection of introducing the character to the world in a way that's just fun and funny. Like, it's brilliant. I love that. But then you're able to
thank you.
Able to go more broad with everything else, like all the other songs that you're doing. You from day one took the perspective, like how you're using your punk, where the music is pretty wide open, right, for the owners of the tracks.
Yeah. So when I put out the first Spottie song in April after purchasing the CryptoPunk in February, and I kept putting out music over the summer last year, 2021. And by August, I had an album. And so we were like, we got to make it an NFT, but we didn't want to just do that for the sake of doing it. We wanted to innovate. So there's 7 songs on the album, and then we created 24 additional remixes of the lead song, I'm Spottie. So you have 7 songs on the album plus 24 remixes. Those are the 31 flavors in the gumball machine. So when you minted the NFT, you didn't know which mix or which song you were going to get. No matter what, whichever song you get, you have a copyright license to use that song in your content. So if you're a podcaster, a filmmaker, video game developer, advertiser, whatever kind of content for personal use or commercial use, you can use the song. You have my permission if you own the corresponding NFT. You can also go on my Discord and I'll give you the stems to that version of the song. So you could have the files for each and every note, each and every instrument, and all the vocals, and do remixes and do what you want with those remixes. That was pretty innovative. All of that was pretty innovative. Like doing it in a gumball machine style drop, I believe, and I said very loudly for the whole time that I believe and nobody's ever challenged me on it. I believe I'm the first human artist to do that as an album. There are like algorithmically generative, music projects that have done similar types of things that predate me. But in terms of like a human recording artist doing that with their music, I believe I was the first. Doing the copyright license the way we did it, I believe we might have been the first to do that too, at least that I know of, because when you own the NFT, you can use the music, you can monetize the music. You might not even be a content creator, and you can sub-license it to a content creator. So McDonald's could pay you to use my song in their commercial. You have my permission to broker that deal, but I still own my masters and I still own my publishing. So I don't give up my rights to the song and my rights to royalties. So if a McDonald's commercial airs and my song plays in that commercial, then I collect a royalty off of that. So I believe that the way we set that up was innovative, and it creates a mutual incentive where if you're one of my collectors, you want to see my music become popular and more in demand because you have a license that the value of that license will go up if the demand for the music goes up. And it of course benefits me too, because I have royalties from the NFT sales on the secondary market, and I have traditional royalties from the music if it's synced or placed in content that airs, things like that. So those were a couple of the things that we did that I think were really innovative. And I appreciate you asking about it, because it takes a minute to explain. And I think it was a big deal. We took a lot of pride in how we explained it. You know, we did explainer videos. We had a very thorough website, which you can still check out as a portion of my current website, SpottieWiFi.io. And we do those same things. We've done those same things in subsequent drops as well. You know, I did a song with Bun-B. We modified the copyright license a bit because we had a guest appearance by Bun-B on that song. But a lot of the same mechanisms are there, and I'm planning the same for my future drops. And we've also done, like with that initial drop, with that album NFT, we pressed 2,000 vinyl records, one for each of the 2,000 NFTs. So, you know, I said for months leading up to the drop that I'm selling an NFT and it comes with a vinyl record. When Complex wrote about it after we sold out on the first day, they said that I sold a vinyl record that came with an NFT. And I was like, wow, that's a way smarter way to explain it, because it's way more like people can grasp that a lot more easily. But yeah, and we've done concerts, live events where if you own the NFT, that's your ticket through the door, you know, partnering with a company called Token Proof that has an app for that sort of thing. We've done merchandise that you can only buy on my Shopify store if you have a specific NFT in your collection, in your wallet. So basically just trying to like push the envelope, you know, in every way possible and explore how this new technology can kind of evolve the relationship between an artist and their listeners, their supporters.
Yeah, definitely. And I always have to ask sort of, what is the longer term? It's down again. It's fine. It'll be okay. Camera just went out again, but it's fine.
That's all good.
What's your long-term plan sort of for sustained revenue? Because secondary royalties are not a consistent thing. I know a lot of times that's sort of the dream, you know, but and I know you've built all these systems and mechanisms, like building a business, building a brand. So I'm always curious how you're sustaining and how you plan to sustain.
So right now we're in a very fortunate position because, you know, we did raise a good amount of revenue during the bull market. You know, the first album, which we sold in August, that did about $250,000 on the first day. You know, it sold 60 Ethereum worth of NFTs in the primary sale, which at that time was almost $200,000. And then it has done well on the secondary market. So there's royalties from that. And then the collection with Bun-B also did well. Right now, we're not looking at NFT sales coming up as our primary revenue source. So that's really one of the best things about the position we're in now, because we can keep things moving with very low overhead, and we do pretty well in terms of booking private events. You know, so I make a lot of connections and build a lot of great relationships at different conferences. And thankfully, usually those are revenue opportunities where somebody's, you know, hiring me, booking me to speak, or an after party is booking me to perform, or both, you know, and that's a blessing because we really don't have a very high overhead. My Stefan, my producer, and me, we work, you know, We have home studios. So we're in a fortunate position, and that's another point, getting back to like the great timing that we had, because we were able to establish ourselves during a bull market in a way that I think is going to set us up to survive a bear market, come out stronger when the next cycle comes, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love everything you're doing. I love how you're doing it, how it's so unique, but I don't want to take too much of your time. Like, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat, dive into your story, and share all the insight. I could have a million more questions for you, but where should we send people to check out your music, follow along? What's best for you?
So on all platforms, I'm at Spottie WiFi. That's SPOTTIE Wi-Fi. And you can check me out at my website, SpottieWiFi.io. I forgot about merch. That's another, revenue stream. We do have the Shopify store there, right? The link is at the top of our website. So check that out. And bro, it's so great to catch up with you, man. I thank you for the opportunity and for helping me tell my story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be remiss if I didn't just say one thing. Could we get a yes, sir?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks so much. I want to thank Mig for joining me on this episode. That was such a great conversation. I had so much fun, and I really hope you enjoyed it too. Again, to follow along with everything he's up to, he's Spottie WiFi on all platforms, SPOTTIE WiFi, and SpottieWiFi.io. But yeah, you had a good time?
I'm so glad we got a yes sir.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked.
I had to. It just puts the biggest smile on my face every time. And
Same.
like the way that he integrates, sort of like Jason Derulo, the way that he integrates with his name in there, his 5528 and all of these things. We should actually close out at the end of this playing a little clip from I'm Spottie, because that song is it's catchy.
So catchy.
It's such an earworm. I didn't even bring up to him how much we love the dancehall remix of the latest song. But anyway,
we love it.
You must check out Spottie WiFi. You must check out his music. Everything you hear, how insightful he is, and how deliberate he does everything. So anyway, I think that's a good spot to wrap. But I'm so glad you enjoyed it as much as I did, because I never know.
Phenomenal.
Like, I'm deep into the conversation. And it was interesting not seeing his face. Having a conversation with a CryptoPunk was very new for me.
I was going to say, how'd you like it?
It was good. I just hope that I was in my head a little bit, because I'm used to connecting eyes to eyes with people. So it changes it a little bit. But yeah.
Welcome to the future, man.
I know. Hey, man. But anyway, I think we'll wrap right there. So thanks again for tuning in to the show. And if you enjoyed it, just give us a thumbs up on YouTube, or leave a comment or review wherever you subscribe. So I think with that, that'll be it. Thanks again for watching, listening, and subscribing, and we will see you next time.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Man, look, they don't even know who I am yet, right? But they gotta learn. They gotta learn. 5528, I'm Spottie. Got lots of spots. Your girl wanna come play connect the dots. I'm Spottie. I'm on the block. Sick with it, looking like chicken pox. I'm Spottie. Last name Pippin. Stock going up, and I ain't tripping. I'm Spottie. I ain't bullshitting, I'm a crypto punk. You a crypto